on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You are listening to The Jan Price Show, and my guest today is Eddie Muller, who is the Turner Classic Movie host of Noir Alley. Welcome, Eddie. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm very excited to be considered a mover and shaker in the film world.
You are. I have so many questions for you. I'm so looking forward to having you on.
That just made my day, Jan. That was really, it's like, okay.
Now you know you've risen in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're a mover and a shaker.
Wait till I tell my wife.
You might get some benefits tonight. Who knows? This is going to be a good interview. I can tell already. We start laughing right away. All right, Eddie. I always like to start off with what is your background. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up becoming the czar of noir.
My background. I am a native San Francisco guy, and I'm for the purposes of this conversation and how it relates to noir. I think the crucial thing is that my relationship with my dad, my father, who was a sports writer in San Francisco for many years, for decades. His only employer his entire life was William Randolph Hearst. He worked for the San Francisco Examiner back when it was the flagship of the Hearst Empire, and I was born kind of late in his life, and somehow just absorbing that whole world, seeing all the photos and reading the stories that he wrote in the 30s, 40s, 50s, gave me a connection to that era that I don't think other kids my age shared. And so I really do sort of trace my interest in not just the films, but the period itself. I trace it back to my dad.
And your dad, from during my research, he covered boxing, right?
Correct.
So...
That was the only sport that he wrote about was boxing. And of course, back then, in the mid-20th century, boxing was a huge sport, much bigger than it is today. And great. It's like the most noir sport there is as well. When I was developing my interest in these movies, it was something that my dad and I could share because, he wasn't really a movie guy, but if the movie was Body and Soul or Champion or Requiem for a Heavyweight or something like that, then we would watch those movies together and talk about it. So that's kind of where I trace my development. But then I was not really, as much as I'm a sports fan and I still like boxing, my interests turned more towards the arts at a certain point, and I went to art school, and then, my dad, probably the way he influenced me the most was that in the sense that I always felt that I could be a writer. Because my dad never even really graduated from high school, and he had a career writing for a major metropolitan newspaper. So I said, well, look, if my dad can do it, I can do that too.
Amazing.
So writing was never, some people say, oh, someday I'll write a book, In my house, it was a very real thing. My dad went to work every day. He wrote a newspaper column. He covered the fights, and he just did it. It wasn't something he studied to do or that he went to school to learn how to do. He just did it. And I sort of approached it all the same way. And so in my 20s, I became a reporter, and I worked for magazines and papers and things. And that's just been a steady thing my whole life.
Street smarts, as I call it, or many
in a sense,
it.
yeah. I kind of call it storytelling, really, because that's how I look at myself. Even when I'm doing this stuff for TCM, it's a form of storytelling, like giving people context for the movies and background stories and things just to make it more interesting. Mm-hmm. My attitude is, if you're going to spend your time watching this, let me give you some info that's going to benefit you and make it that much more interesting without giving away the plot or anything like that.
Right.
So that's always been my interest, is in just telling people stories.
So what was the kernel of the idea that ended up having you become such a fan of film noir? I mean, you said a little bit about your dad, but you didn't go, is there a little bit more that really led you on this path? Because this is a very different path.
Well, I think it's two things. Number one, there's always going to be stuff that appeals to people where there is no explanation. You don't know why you prefer to read this type of book instead of some people relate to comedies, some people relate to dramas. I mean, at a certain point I stopped trying to analyze it because it's just who you are. It's just your innate character draws you to certain things. And these types of stories, yes, I have an interest in them. I haven't gone to psychoanalysis to find out why. But I will say this. It continues to be of interest to me because I find that point in American history very, very fascinating. Mid-20th century American history, right after World War II, is endlessly fascinating to me. For the politics, for the history, for the arts, it seemed to me that America sort of reached a zenith at a certain point, right? We just saved the world, and now all of this stuff was happening, and America was changing very dramatically, and it was a very tumultuous period. The Cold War and a lot of things that we're seeing repeated right now in the culture were happening then, and it was a real struggle. And the backdrop for all of this was these artists suddenly emerging into the mainstream in terms of photography and modern art and music and all of this stuff that was really, really fascinating, just like this explosion of creativity. And I really do think that film noir fit right into that. And in some respects, it was like the pinnacle of the Hollywood studio system because of how gorgeous these movies looked, but at the same time, it was something darker than that because it was really about the culture losing its innocence and realizing that things weren't going to end happily ever after, and that we needed to kind of grow out of that mentality, which developed in Hollywood because it was seen as Hollywood's job to help the public get through the Great Depression and then help the public get through the Great War. And then once those things were accomplished, it was almost as if the artist said, okay, can we grow up now?
Yes. It's exactly right. That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think that because of, I love films of the 30s and 40s in particular, anything to do with the war, because they needed to have happier endings because of what was going on in the world, do you think the artists were like germinating underneath, like waiting for that period to be over so they could do more realistic movies for the American public to consume?
I don't think there's any question about that. I think you just hit the nail right on the head, which is why a lot of analysis of film noir, they place it too closely, the scholars place it too closely to the time the films were released. So they're seeing the artist commenting on something that was happening right then, right? That this is about the post-war world. This is about the Cold War. When the truth of it is, this is stuff the artists were wanting to talk about 20 years earlier. It's just they couldn't get it out because there was a production code that was reinforced in 1934. There was the Depression. Then there was the war. And it's like, we can't tell dark, unsettling stories now because that's not our job. And I do believe, just as you said, that artists, and it wasn't really that the artists were wanting to say something about, the corruption at the core of society or all this. Some of them were. But sometimes artists just want to tell a story. And it's like, here's a story that nobody's told yet. I want to do this one. And if it ends badly, so be it. It ends badly. It's a story about what happens when people do terrible things and the consequences they pay. And that's a valid story, right? But for a long time, it was like, nope, we're not doing those. That's not what we need to see on the movie screens. All of that is endlessly fascinating to me, and I still think that today, what is the result of how does the entertainment that's produced for this culture affect the culture at large?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a very, very significant consideration. And back then, it was like movie houses. And, kids didn't really pack movie houses in the 30s and 40s, right? That wasn't where they went. Now, we're just bombarded with this stuff every day in our homes, right? And it's a totally different thing. I don't think anybody really I think we've been so overwhelmed by this that no one has time to step back and say, whoa, is this healthy?
Yeah.
Is this a good thing?
Good question. We can delve into that much deeper after these few commercial breaks. We'll be right back. You are listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM, and like the Jan Price Show on Facebook.
Have you ever dreamed of doing commercials or movies? Your dream starts with a desire, and if you have the desire to do commercials and feature films, we want to know about you. We're Moco Film, one of the Genesis companies that includes VoiceJock, a major provider of TV commercial talent to TV stations throughout the nation. Registering is free. Just go to mocofilm.com and fill out the information. That's MOCOfilm.com. You'll become part of a large talent bank available to producers. Go to mocofilm.com today and start living your dream.
Tired of looking at your worn wood floors? Mr. Sandless can bring them back to life again. That's right, it's Mr. Sandless, the no sanding solution to beautiful wood floors. Mr. Sandless is clean, efficient, contains no harmful chemicals, and is certified green. Mr. Sandless refinishes all hardwoods, softwoods, engineered flooring, and laminates. Most jobs are completed in one day with no cleanup required ever, with virtually no odor, and is safe for pets and kids. No need to move out or even leave the house. Mr. Sandless is the company that invented Sandless Refinishing and is the largest floor refinishing company in the world. Over 120,000 happy customers, guaranteed adhesion, guaranteed satisfaction, and a 5-year warranty. Call Mr. Sandless today at 831-747-7476. That's 747-7476. Or MrSandless.com. That's MrSandless.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
Turner Classic Movies host Eddie Muller and he hosts Noir Alley. And Eddie, we were just talking about the effect of movies on society. That's a big question.
Yeah, how did I go down that road, right?
And I think we could sit here for hours trying to figure that out,
yeah,
especially in today's world. But I did want to ask you to go back to noir because that's really your specialty. What elements does a film need to have to be considered noir?
Well, this is, I'm going to preface that by saying that one of the things to me that is so fascinating about this subject, and that I see now, on social media, people reacting to the show and all this stuff, is you can debate that, right? And people do this all the time. Like, is this noir? There's a little feature I do on social media where it's called Noir or Not, where they just throw me a film title and I give my opinion of whether or not I think the film is noir or not. And the fact that this is even a subject is part of what makes this whole thing so interesting. Like if you said, Red River, is that a Western or not? It's obvious, right? It's a Western.
Mm-hmm.
But noir is something entirely different, and people debate all the time whether it's a look to the films or whether it's a genre of film. Is it a particular type of story? So I think when people talk about film noir, what the first thing that comes to mind is that they are urban films, crime films, largely from mid-20th century. People assumed for a long time that they were American, that they're Hollywood movies. But now that I've been doing this long enough, I can attest to you that that is not true. That is a very ethnocentric way of looking at it. And there are films like this made all around the world. Not obviously to the same degree that they were made in Hollywood, and not all of those films necessarily are influenced by the Hollywood style. Sometimes it works the other way. But that's what you're going to see. You're going to see the guys in the trench coats and the fedoras and very stark, high contrast black and white cinematography. And to me, because I look at this from a writer's standpoint more than a stylistic standpoint, the thing that really was fresh and in a way a little bit subversive about these movies at the time they were made is that the protagonists were often the guilty people. You could tell stories in which they were not heroes. These are tales about why the guy decides he has to rob the bank, why he gets involved. Why the drifter shows up at the Twin Oaks diner and falls for the owner's wife and plots to murder him and get away with the money. That's film noir. So to me, the crucial factor in whether or not a film is truly noir, and this is just my opinion now, is that it's a story about people who are doing the wrong thing. And they know it's the wrong thing, but they do it anyway. And then they face the consequences.
Is there a period of time in which film noir is considered the prime period for it, like, from 1947 to 1957? What are the parameters? Is that about right? A 10-year period there?
I would say you're close. I would say that the peak years, it definitely began seriously as a movement in 1944, and it probably was starting to fade in 51. I would say. So right in that window is when, you got 8 major studios in Hollywood, and I would say that each one of those studios was making realistically like 6 to 8 of these a year during that period. So that's a lot of films. And then, there are obviously examples of these types of stories and the look of the films and everything before 1944. And there were films that had this look and feel and the same themes after 1952. But that period is when it was what I call Hollywood's only organic artistic movement. And by which I mean, A, it's organic because there was no economic reason to make these films. They didn't all make money. But the key thing was they didn't lose money because they didn't cost a lot to make. They're by and large small stories with a small cast. So they were fresh, and they appealed to the artists almost as much as they appealed to the audience, actually more, because there was a new way of shooting the films, and the cinematographers dove into that, and the actors were like, this is great, I want to play a compromised character, When you see somebody like Tyrone Power, who is like, Mr. Beautiful Hero, make a movie like Nightmare Alley in 1947, that is significant. That indicates there's a trend happening here. And, your otherwise heroic actors are suddenly, playing bad guys or venal characters or something. And to go back to what you said originally, the reason for this, it's not like, oh, this is a great thing. We want to rub people's noses in how cruel and mean-spirited the world is. It was just that artists want to tell stories. They are compelled to do things in new and interesting ways, and they were prevented from doing that for a long time. And so suddenly it just spilled out in this trend for these movies. And that's one of the main reasons for it. I know people ascribe a lot of social reasons to it, but I think there are artistic reasons that are every bit as valid.
Whenever I talk to actors, they always say they love playing the subversive characters rather than the hero all the time. They like to be the anti-hero because I think they can delve deeper into to that type of role, and it also delves into a different part of our psyche, too. So do you think that was one of the other reasons that many of the actors, the A-list actors, decided that they wanted to be in the film noir?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that, really. I mean, you nailed it. Generally the hero is a fairly one-dimensional character. He's doing the right thing because he's been told it's the right thing to do. It's much more psychologically complex when you're a character struggling with what is the right thing to do. I know I'm doing what I'm thinking of doing is wrong, but damn it, I'm going to do it anyway. I can't stop myself, and that makes for great drama. Mm-hmm. And I think it greatly appealed to a lot of actors. I know it appealed to writers. I think directors were very taken with these stories, the cinematographers, all the way down the line. That's why I say it was an organic, artistic movement. And interestingly, the reason it ended is because of television. Because these types of stories are minimalist, and they work just as well on television. I hate to say it. They work just as well on television, as my new show, Noir Alley on TCM, will attest, as they work on a big screen. So the movie studios in the 1950s realized, wow, people are staying home and watching TV. We have to do something different. And so obviously they went to widescreen, CinemaScope, Technicolor, lavish spectacles, epics and big westerns and all this stuff. And film noir kind of faded away. But contrary to the popular belief, it didn't disappear. It actually moved to TV.
Interesting.
And as we're seeing now, there are a lot of these shows being revived, and there's a whole new area of exploration with shows like Naked City and Johnny Staccato and The Fugitive and M Squad and all this stuff from the 50s and early 60s. That's what film noir morphed into. It morphed into TV noir.
Interesting. I didn't even put that together. What was the audience when film noir films first were released? What was the audience response to them?
It's very interesting. The response was very positive. I mean, the big hits were like The Postman Always Rings Twice and Gilda, The Killers, films like that had obviously very sexy stars like Burt Lancaster and Rita Hayworth, Ava Gardner, John Garfield, Lana Turner. That's always going to be the case, right? It's just that the audience at that time was seeing their favorite sexy movie stars doing things that were kind of forbidden. So that was the root of the major popular appeal. My research has shown, and this is really fascinating to me, that it was by and large an urban phenomenon. These films were very popular in cities because they were largely set in cities like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago and San Francisco, and they were stories about people living in those environments. By the late 1940s and early 1950s, the exhibitors in small-town America were actively complaining about these movies, saying it's scaring the people, in the sticks, as Variety would refer to it, that they're unnerved because it's a depiction of the culture that is scary to them. Like there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of corruption happening. And there was a very strong backlash against the films. Like I've seen letters from exhibitors, theater owners, like just stop making these movies. Our audience doesn't want these movies anymore. And it's still the same kind of demographic breakdown you're seeing today in America, yes, right? I mean, the urban life versus rural life. Exactly. It still goes on today.
It still does go on today. It hasn't changed. We're going to be right back after these brief messages. You are listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM, and like the Jan Price Show on Facebook.
Do you have difficulty falling or staying asleep? Do you suffer from snoring, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, or other sleep disorders? If so, we can help. Call Monterey Bay Sleep Center and arrange a sleep study in one of our luxury suites. We specialize in diagnosing and treating sleep disorders so you can regain your quality of life. Our luxury suites feature hotel-quality beds and flat panel TVs so that you feel most comfortable during your stay. Call us today to arrange a sleep study at our secure facility in Monterey.
Call 831-920-1411. That's 831-920-1411.
The Ozio Theater in downtown Monterey is now open every day, showing independent and foreign films. The Ozio Theater has new concession offerings, including beer, wine, hard cider, and their homemade Lush Slush. You can now schedule private event screenings for community charity events, birthdays, anniversaries, or just a fun gathering of friends. For more information, visit the Ozio Theater online at oziotheater.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is Eddie Muller, who's the Turner Classic Movies host of Noir Alley. Eddie, before we went on the break, I wanted to ask you what else was going on that affected this kind of movie making during that time period?
You mean like politically?
Politically, and yes. What other things were contributing to this type of films being made?
Well, I think that the sense of paranoia that you find in a lot of the movies of that period, especially the noir films of that period, was the result of congressional hearings that were taking place at the time, the House Committee on Un-American Activities, which was investigating the communist influence in the entertainment business. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways they did that was by, I'm going to use the term grandstanding, with the caveat that I understand that sounds like an editorial comment, but I'm just using it because it was a strategic thing that the politicians did to draw attention to what they were doing. It's like the bigger the star that you can pull in front of the congressional committee to interrogate, the more heat you're going to get from the media, right? Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed.
And so, but this led to an incredible climate of fear and paranoia in Hollywood because the congressional investigators were using a very, very broad brush with which to paint the industry. And there were also, in addition to, sometimes legitimate claims that people were involved in political, subversive activities, let's say. Given that, at the time, it was not against the law to be a member of the Communist Party of America. It was another alternative political party, and a lot of people who worked in Hollywood had joined the party in the 1930s, believing that it was an alternative to what led up to the Depression, right? Mm-hmm. So they were investigated, but there was also an aspect of it that very quickly you realized when you read these transcripts and things that there's an incredible anti-Semitic angle to all of this, and they're asking people to reveal their original names and why did you change your name, and it was just a dreadful time. Scoundrel time, as Lillian Hellman called it, and it created this climate of fear that I think is palpable in a lot of the movies of that period. And you would end up seeing a lot of noir films that would focus on the accusations against an innocent man and the trouble he has defending himself and these things, and a lot of filmmakers from that period were blacklisted. Just on the stuff I've shown on Noir Alley, it's interesting to me. This is something hasn't really come up yet. I haven't gotten feedback on this yet, but it's something I'm very aware of. When I pick the the movies that I wanted to show, I just was picking them because, here's a great movie. Oh, here's another great movie. I can't wait to show this. Then, of course, you go on and you have to say something about the film, right? and put the film in context. And as I said before, I am not going to theorize about these movies because that's not what I do. I don't tell people, this is what this movie really means. Here's the hidden meaning in it. And people can figure stuff out for themselves.
Right.
But I will give context to this is what was happening with the people who made this film at the time the film was made. And it's amazing how many times I've had to say in my introductions, the people who made this film left the country. They were forced out of the country. They couldn't work any longer. They were blacklisted. John Barry, Jules Dassin, Joseph Losey, Dalton Trumbo sent to prison. So, yes, that's what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
Did you know I was going to give that answer when you asked that question?
No, I did not. I never know what anybody's going to answer. That's what makes it interesting. I'm not trying to lead you down a path, but I do. Let's talk a little bit about Noir Alley. First of all, that you how did that come about? Did TCM approach you, or did you approach them? How did it come about that you began to do a show called Noir Alley on Turner Classic
that's
Movies?
a good question. I think it was an organic thing, much like the development of film noir. Now, I had been doing work with TCM for a number of years, and obviously they knew me as a specialist in this area, right? And I had done. And I'm not even sure that there are people working at TCM right now that I work with who know how far back my relationship with the network goes. It goes all the way back, I think, to 2002.
Oh, really?
When they did their first thing called the Summer of Darkness. And I'm going to tell this story, and I hope people from TCM hear this and reply to this.
Okay.
Because I find it very amusing. So back in 2002, I wrote a book called Dark City Dames that was about 6 actresses who were synonymous with film noir, right? And they were putting together their first Summer of Darkness, which was like 2 full months of film noir, like a gigantic film noir festival on the air. And they wanted to get these actresses to appear on the network. So they contacted me saying, well, you wrote this book. How do we get a hold of these women? And, of course, at this point, I'm angling for, how can I get some exposure on the, on the network? And they wouldn't have anything to do with me.
Oh, really? But they contacted you. They were aware of your book.
They wanted the actresses,
They didn't want you.
Of course, and I'm trying, and I'm acting like their agent or something, because at this point they were in their 80s and most of them did not have agents any longer. And so I'm like brokering this thing, but I'm saying you should have me come on and do the interview with them because they all know me,
Mm-hmm. Right.
And but that didn't fly because they wanted, a known actor. And I think it's fascinating. I'm telling tales out of school now, but what are you going to do? To me, it's fascinating that even back then, in 2002, the guy they wanted to interview all these women in a round table was Alec Baldwin.
Back then.
Who now, of course, is one of the faces of the network, right?
Right.
But something didn't work out, and his schedule didn't allow it, and they, the actor Scott Glenn?
Yes.
Scott Glenn did it instead. But I wrote a lot of Scott Glenn's questions for him. Because I don't think he was really that up to speed on this subject. And anyway, so that was my first connection to the network. And then over the years, we just sort of were in each other's orbit, and then I did more for them. And this is a very long answer, Jan. I'm sorry.
No.
But,
it's fascinating.
But it is... but I never actually did pitch them a show. They the next time they came around to do the Summer of Darkness, they asked me to host it.
Oh, when was that?
I think it was two summers ago. That sounds right. I'm getting old now. I can't keep track of years. So they asked me to do that, and then this always makes me laugh. So people really responded well to the Summer of Darkness thing, and everybody said, "When are you going to do that again? When are they going to do that again?" And when I talked to the head of programming at TCM, and I said, "Seemed like a winner, man. Are we going to do that again?" And he said, "No, we're not going to do that." And to be honest, I was a little crestfallen. It's what more do I really? And then I realized later it's because they were thinking of like a regular show. Like, we're just going to do this every week instead of just in the summer. And they approached me and said, "Would you consider doing this?" And here we are.
And here we are. I have lots more questions for you coming up after these few commercial breaks. You're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460 and 101 FM. And like the Jan Price Show on Facebook.
Tired of looking at your worn wood floors? Mr. Sandless can bring them back to life again. That's right, it's Mr. Sandless, the no sanding solution to beautiful wood floors. Mr. Sandless is clean, efficient, contains no harmful chemicals, and is certified green. Mr. Sandless refinishes all hardwoods, softwoods, engineered flooring, and laminates. Most jobs are completed in one day with no cleanup required ever, with virtually no odor, and is safe for pets and kids. No need to move out or even leave the house. Mr. Sandless is the company that invented Sandless Refinishing and is the largest floor refinishing company in the world. Over 120,000 happy customers, guaranteed adhesion, guaranteed satisfaction, and a 5-year warranty. Call Mr. Sandless today at 831-747-7476. That's 747-7476. Or MrSandless.com. That's MrSandless.com.
Have you ever dreamed of doing commercials or movies? Your dream starts with a desire. And if you have the desire to do commercials and feature films, we want to know about you. We're Moco Film, one of the Genesis companies that includes VoiceJock, a major provider of TV commercial talent to TV stations throughout the nation. Registering is free. Just go to mocofilm.com and fill out the information. That's MOCOfilm.com. You'll become part of a large talent bank available to producers. Go to mocofilm.com today and start living your dream.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is Eddie Muller, who is a Turner Classic Movie host of Noir Alley. So when did they finally approach you to do a weekly show?
It was, oh my gosh. Again, I'm terrible with dates. It was last summer. I'm going to say last summer. I think that's right.
And then how long after that did it take to launch your show? Because you launched it this spring?
It was yes, March 5th was the first show, and it was funny. They said we're going to do this, and everybody had lots of great ideas for how to approach it, but timing-wise, because I do a lot of my own stuff. I have a foundation that restores films called the Film Noir Foundation, and I write and do all kinds of other things, and I have a whole network of my own film festivals that I do around the country called the Noir City Film Festivals, and it was tough to figure out a time when we could actually do this. So, interestingly, I think I shot the first, I'm going to say 14, 15 shows just weeks before it aired. I mean, it was really close to, we shot them in February, and it aired on March 5th, started March 5th.
Do you pick your own movies, or does Turner pick them for you?
It's a combination of things, and thank you for asking, because this is something that I think people aren't quite aware of, just movie fans in general who maybe watch the network and don't know how this all works. It's not as simple as just saying, I want to show this. I mean, you have to find the material, it has to be in a digital form or transferred digitally, and you have to have the rights to show it. You have to license the films to show. And not everything, just because Turner shows a movie once, doesn't mean they have the license to show that movie whenever they want to show it. I mean, there are terms to these licenses, you know. You can license it for a year or 2 years or part of a package or individually, whatever. I mean, it's very, very complicated. So the way it works is Charlie Tabish, the vice president of programming, will provide me with like an inventory. Like, here are films that are in play. You know, we prefer that you pick from this list because we know that we have the rights to show these movies right in the next year or so. If there's something I'm really, really adamant about, like, oh, but Charlie, you know, there's an anniversary coming up, or of an actor or a director or something, or there's a story I really want to tell, I can tell him, let's try to show this movie, and very often, you know, they will accommodate, and we just have a really, really compatible, wonderful partnership going on. I mean, I really, really like the people at TCM. I'm still waiting to find like the one crab apple in the bunch that I stay away from this guy, you know. But it hasn't happened. I mean, everybody is just really great.
That's great. It's very collaborative then, and that's always, you know, makes work much easier. Watching your show, and if anybody has not seen it, I highly recommend watching it. And it's on Sunday mornings on the East Coast at 10 a.m. and on the West Coast at 7 a.m. and in between for the rest of the middle of America. But it's a true...
Jan, do you get up at 7 a.m. to watch the show?
I tape you.
Okay.
I tape you. I tape everything on Turner. First of all, it's the only thing I watch. I don't watch anything else. Everybody can tell you I just love Turner Classic Movies. I have my Sundays blocked off if we have a foggy day, which we have a lot here on Sundays, and I'll just sit and watch a lot of the movies that I've recorded. But almost every night I watch at least one movie, unless I'm out and about doing a lot of other things. But yeah, so I do. I do record your show, and I must say it's a true education watching your show, much more in depth than some of the other shows that are on Turner, and I don't think they have as much time as they give you, because they give you quite a bit. And I love watching, you know, beginning and the end, you know, before the movie starts and then at the end. And it's a true education. So do you write your own, do you do all your own research and write your own material, or does Turner Classic Movies staff help you with that?
No, I write it all. They help me in the sense of they will find, on occasion, they find something that I have wrong, which is very, very useful.
Yes.
But no, I write it all. Well, I will just say this. I mean, I do write it all myself, and I greatly appreciate that they have given me this much latitude. And you know, I wasn't sure how it was going to work going in, but quite honestly, they said, "Look, here's the show. You pick the shows," and I did that, and I wrote introductions, and the first one I wrote was for the Maltese Falcon, and I sent it in, and I said, "This is my test intro and outro. Let me know what you think," and they just accepted it. And it was long. It was the length it was, right? And they said, "No, we're gonna give a little air to this and let it breathe, you know, and see how it works." And then I was stunned when I went to Atlanta to shoot those first shows, and I walked into the studio and saw that set, which was like, "Are you kidding me? This is fantastic."
It really is a fantastic set. It really, truly is.
I mean, we had talked about what kind of set we wanted, and they were kind enough to, you know, listen to my my input. You know, when I said there has to be a bar. I mean, if it's my set, there has to be a bar. That's all there is to it. And they accommodated. And if you keep watching, Jan, you'll see that the bar is going to be put to use.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I noticed you're also the czar of Pinot Noir, but we'll get into that a little later.
Oh well, yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Yes. Anyhow.
But it was fantastic. And then you know, I realized when I went there to shoot the first thing, and I can say this now because it turned out so well, that I went from the dressing room and walked over to the studio door, and I said, this is going to really be a crucial moment, because if I walked out there and I didn't like the set, it was going to be disappointing.
Right.
And I was going to feel like this wasn't really what I thought it was going to be. This could have been so much better, and blah, blah. And then I walked out there, and it was like, oh, my God. It was just better than I could ever have expected. And everybody is excited about it. The crew loves it. It's fun to, the directors love it, and it's we have a lot to play with on that set, and because it's a noir show, they get to mess around with the lighting effects, and it's pretty great. People haven't seen all this stuff yet, but there's we bring in some smoke effects, and we even have lightning coming up at one point.
Oh my goodness! Oh, how fun!
It's pretty good.
That is fun. So when you go to Atlanta to shoot these, how many do you do at one time? I mean, how long do you stay in Atlanta, and how many do you do when you're there? And how often do you have to go to Atlanta to tape these?
Well, we haven't really set the schedule yet. I think I probably will go. I think it would average 4 times a year, and then.
Okay. So you do a lot at one time.
Oh yes, oh yes, we do. And I have to tell you a funny story. You had mentioned earlier, they give me latitude and they give me a little room because it's a one-off, right?
Right.
So when I was there the first time, either the first time or the second time shooting my stuff. No, it was the first time I was there because it was Valentine's Day. I remember I was there on Valentine's Day, and Ben was there. Ben Mankiewicz was there shooting his stuff, and so we actually had a little Valentine's Day get together, just the two of us.
Oh, just you and Ben, how romantic!
Yeah, it was very, very sweet. We wanted to start a rumor at the network. Right?
Yes.
So, but it was so funny because Ben says to me, so how many intros and outros did you tape today? And I thought, I was like such a stud. I did 13. I did 13 today. And Ben looks at me and goes, I did 34.
Oh my goodness.
You see, Ben is really carrying the load.
He is.
At TCM,
He
is. They've just got him doing so many of them that there's no way they could have the breadth and the depth that, I get to do one a week.
Right. So you write all of your intros and outros and do a lot of deep research where I don't know if Ben does. I don't know if, because I talked to Dave Karger. Dave Karger said he didn't write his. The research team, did everything.
Well, it's a totally different thing, really. I mean, it's apples and oranges. I know that Ben does what Robert did.
Exactly.
Because I had the good fortune of working with Robert a few times,
lucky you.
Both live and in the studio, and I know that Robert would, he did so much that he couldn't sit there and write all of his intros, but he would look at the script and then he would edit the script. And he would change the script, and he would say, "I want to make this comment," or whatever, and they could do it right on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is tremendous. And I know that Ben does that because Ben brings his own personal attitude and his style to it.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And but there's no way, frankly, you can't pay Ben enough money to write it all himself then get up and do it all.
Not when you're doing 34 in a day. I mean, it's Herculean to do all of that. But you definitely know that Ben has his own little quirky sense of humor, his dry sense of humor, which I love, and he brings that. So he's bringing himself to it. He's not reading off a teleprompter.
Absolutely. And I have to tell you, Ben is like heroic because I've gotten to know him pretty well, and we're pretty good buddies. And when I saw Ben do the heavy lifting when Robert fell ill, and not just on the air, but at their Turner Classic Movies film festivals, when suddenly, just days before the festival, it's like, well, Robert can't make it. And to see Ben, step into the breach like that and suddenly he's doing twice as many interviews with people and twice as many introductions as he thought he was going to be doing. He's exceptional at it.
That's great. And he seems like he's a really wonderful person,
He's a good
too.
guy.
Really good. We're going to be right back after these brief messages. You are listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk, 1460 and 101 FM, and like the Jan Price Show on Facebook.
Do you have difficulty falling or staying asleep? Do you suffer from snoring, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, or other sleep disorders? If so, we can help. Call Monterey Bay Sleep Center and arrange a sleep study in one of our luxury suites. We specialize in diagnosing and treating sleep disorders so you can regain your quality of life. Our luxury suites feature hotel-quality beds and flat-panel TVs so that you feel most comfortable during your stay. Call us today to arrange a sleep study at our secure facility in Monterey.
Call 831-920-1411. That's 831-920-1411.
The Ozio Theater in downtown Monterey is now open every day, showing independent and foreign films. The Ozio Theater has new concession offerings, including beer, wine, hard cider, and their homemade Lush Slush. You can now schedule private event screenings for community charity events, birthdays, anniversaries, or just a fun gathering of friends. For more information, visit the Ozio Theater online at oziotheater.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
We are back, and my guest today is Eddie Muller, and he's a Turner Classic Movie host of Noir Alley. We only have a few more minutes. Unfortunately, I could sit and talk to you a lot longer, so I hope to have you back on the show, Eddie. But I do want to ask...
That would be my pleasure.
Great. I would love it, because there's so much more to dig into. I want to ask you, though, do you have a favorite film noir?
Yes. The movie is In a Lonely Place with Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham, and it will be coming up on Noir Alley, I think, in September.
Oh, great. So why? Why do you like this one?
Because I have to have one. Because everybody asked me this question, right? That's
I'm
why.
sorry. I'm not original at all. But what reason? Other than that you have to have one? There's got to be some reason.
I'll tell you why. Because I first saw the film when I was a teenager in San Francisco at the Castro Theater, and it had a somewhat profound impact on me, and I wasn't exactly sure why. Because I don't think I was old enough to completely understand what this film was actually about. And it's a film I return to very often. I watch it at least once a year, and it never fails reveals something else that's kind of, some other profound layer to it. And I just, it's about a writer, and it's not really film noir in the sense of cops and robbers and, there's no gunplay or anything. It's really just about relationships, and specifically the relationship of this creative person who, and I guess one of the reasons I like it so much is because it asks the question about, like, what is the price of creativity? He's a Hollywood writer, but he has really negative aspects to his personality. This is played by Humphrey Bogart. And he has very negative aspects to his personality, and the question everybody asks is that the price you pay? Being his friend and being his, or in the case of the Gloria Graham character, his potential partner, you have to put up with that if the person has this talent and this creativity. And that's a very significant question, and I think it's one that Bogart himself and that the director Nicholas Ray were exploring for their own purposes, because that was something that they were going through in their own lives. And I think it's a very mature and sophisticated film for its time, and for any time, really.
We will look forward to seeing that hopefully in September. Eddie, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show. You've been a wonderful guest. And
Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And I want you to know, I while we were talking, I actually liked you on Facebook.
Oh, yay. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's great. Thank you so much,
Well, you
Eddie.
kept telling me to do it at every break, so it's okay.
So you listen, you do what you're told. You're a good husband.
I'm working on it.
It's great. Have a great day. You are listening to The Jan Price Show, all about movies on Power Talk 1460.